Good last count, Corla and Taoiseach. On Tuesday and again yesterday, I raised in this House with the Taoiseach the issue of the Spiritans and the horrific abuse of children perpetrated at Blackrock College. And at that one school alone, we are now learning of the really horrific scale of the abuse that was perpetrated, with it being revealed yesterday that, for example, out of the class of 1979, 25 boys out of 120 in that class have now reported abuse, a staggering figure of 21%. We know that 300 individuals have now come forward disclosing abuse perpetrated upon them, and yet just 3 of the 77 Spiritans with allegations made against them have criminal convictions. So the scale is indeed staggering, and indeed we've been in contact, myself, Deputy Reardon and others in Labour have been in contact with many of the survivors who've come forward. I do welcome the Taoiseach's commitment in response to my question on Tuesday that we will have a debate on this matter in the House next week. That's very welcome. I also welcome the apology from the Spiritans announced yesterday morning, and indeed the announcement that they will establish an independent process to provide a forum for survivors of abuse to come forward. And I do salute, as I know we all do, the bravery of those individuals who have already come forward and who have disclosed publicly, and whose courage in doing so has enabled others to step forward too. But we believe that we do still need to see an independent inquiry take place, not only to uncover the extent of the abuse perpetrated not just by the Spiritans within one school, but it now seems by other orders within other schools which have not yet been the subject of an inquiry and which have not yet necessarily come into the public domain. And we're seeing even today other schools now being named. We know also that such an inquiry must be survivor-led. It must seek to review the extent of the abuse and, crucially, the existence of institutional cover-ups in individual schools and by particular orders. And it should also seek, Taoiseach, to examine the role of the state, and in particular the failures of the state, what the state could and should have done to prevent abuse in schools where the teachers were paid by the state, where the schools were receiving significant public funding. I think we're all very conscious of the complexity of establishing such an inquiry. It may need to be done in modular fashion, for example, and clearly we need to hear more from survivors. And I did welcome the Taoiseach's indication that he'd meet with survivors in doing so. But we also need to consider current concerns. I spoke yesterday about current issues, a person against whom serious allegations of abuse have been made, who continues to live on the grounds of Blackrock College. I'm not going to name the individual. The matter is with the Gardaí, as it should be. But the reality is this is not just an historic issue. Not only are there perpetrators still living who have evaded any sort of sanction to date, but there are those currently in leadership roles in particular schools who have been in those roles for so long, many decades in some cases, that it's very difficult to believe that they did not have knowledge of the abuse that was being perpetrated there. So, Taoiseach, can I ask in advance of next week's debate what preliminary thoughts you have and your government has on how this matter can be investigated by the state?
Thanks, Deputy, and I just want to thank Deputy Bacik again for raising this important issue here in the Dáil. I had a chance on Monday to listen to the radio documentary, and it was very compelling, and I want to pay tribute to the bravery of all of those who participated in it. If people don't tell their story, it's very hard for us to take actions against people who carry out abuse and prevent it happening in future, and I really want to recognise their bravery in coming forward and participating in that particular documentary. This is a matter that the government is very concerned about. The cruelty and pervasive nature of the allegations is truly shocking. My thoughts in the first instance are with the survivors who've bravely told us their story. Parents must be able to send their children to school in the knowledge that they're not only receiving the best education they can, but also that they're in a safe environment. And that is true for the vast majority of schools in our state. I understand a restorative justice process has now been put in place by the Spiritans, which is very welcome, and a debate on these issues is scheduled for next week. As the Taoiseach said earlier, the government is going to give this matter further consideration, particularly the most effective way to have a victim-led inquiry to allow us to unearth what happened at Blackrock College and indeed other Spiritan schools, specifically who knew what and how they acted, if at all. We just don't know yet what the best form of inquiry or what form of inquiry should take place. We're very conscious of the length of time that some inquiries take, and we want to make sure that how it happens is in the right way, and that's extremely important, I think, for the survivors. Finally, I just once again want to encourage anyone who has been the victim of sexual abuse in school or elsewhere to contact the Gardaí. The Gardaí have extensive powers of investigation. They can carry out arrests. They can interview people, seize documents and devices. That can lead to a prosecution and can lead to perpetrators being punished. And that, in many ways, is much more powerful than many other forms of inquiry.
That response, and I absolutely endorse your comments and your encouragement that anyone who has been the victim of sexual abuse in school or elsewhere should of course report that matter to the Gardaí. I would also be glad to engage constructively with you and the government on the structure of an inquiry, and indeed survivors have been in contact with me to express their view that an inquiry and a process should engage in particular in ensuring that safeguards will be put in place to make sure that abuse like this will not happen in the future, that cultural changes will have to be made in different institutions, radical change in systems of governance, and of course crucially supports for survivors and victims. So I look forward to a further debate on that. But I should stress again, this is not just an historic issue. There are people still currently in leadership roles, in particular in Blackrock College, who have had continuous ongoing involvement with the college for 40 years. And I'm well aware that of one individual currently in a key leadership role who was told of specific abuse allegations in 2002, and who has over the past decade been approached by other survivors who have been told by him to go away and not return unless they have proof and a solicitor with them. So these are current issues, these are not just historic, and survivors do want to see these addressed by us as legislators and by the state.
Thanks, Deputy. I think it's fair to say there is a broad consensus across the House that we do need an inquiry into these matters, that it should be victim-led and should be survivor-led. But as we all know from our own experiences of inquiries that have been initiated by government or by this House, getting the form of the inquiry right is really important, and getting the terms of reference is really important too. And inquiries can range from non-statutory inquiries such as the Scally report, which I think people would see as a good model, albeit in a very different circumstance, to statutory ones, which can also be very good models, but obviously can take a very long time as well. And one thing we do need to bear in mind is that we don't want to do anything that might compromise any Garda inquiries or any prosecutions. I think it is possible to have an inquiry without doing that, but we do need to have regard to the possibility that it might interfere with Garda inquiries or prosecutions or civil cases. We just need to make sure that we don't make any mistakes in that regard.